running your first 50K ultramarathon can be an intimidating challenge. It will take a lot of work and dedication to get both your body and your mind ready for the challenge ahead. But it's a journey that is well worth the effort. You will learn a lot about yourself. You will discover that you're capable of much more than you thought possible. But where should you start? How can you get ready for a 50K ultramarathon? This is my guide for training and racing your first 50K ultramarathon. Basically, everything I wish I knew before I start ultra running, and I'll focus a lot on my tips to make sure that you develop good habits that will help you be successful and sustainable on the long run. Hi, Simon here. Welcome to my channel. The goal of my channel is to make trail and ultra running more accessible. And one of the ways I do that is sharing my experience and everything I've learned on my own journey, which is to race 100-mile ultramarathon. This video is my general guide to running a 50K ultramarathon. Whether it's your first or you want to improve, I'll provide you a lot of tips. And because this is a general guide, I also have a lot of topic-specific video on my channel. Whenever there is a video that dives deeper into a specific topics, I'll do a ding and I'll link it so that you can learn more about it. For example, we'll talk briefly about fueling, but if you want to understand better how to fuel before a race, during a race, I have videos about that too. This 50K guide will be divided in a few sections. Some general comments about 50K, why running a 50K, and then we get into the specific. The various topics will be finding your why, finding your race, creating a training plan, training, race date, and the aftermath. First, who is this video for and who can run a 50K ultramarathon? I think one of the great things about the 50K and ultramarathon in general is that it's much more accessible and attainable than people think. Yes, it is challenging, but as long as you're decently healthy, a good training will bring you there. And for the 50K specifically, I think it's a bit of a choose your own adventure or make up your own challenge. We all have different physical ability. And that means that choosing the right race, choosing the right pace will be important for you to push your own limits. And that is something that is very important and is specifically true for the 50K. Because the 50K is both much easier, but also much harder than it sounds like. Some people hear 50K and they think, it's kind of a marathon plus 8 kilometers. Same thing. And I think this is very misleading. Those 8 kilometers matter a hell of a lot. Difficulty is not linear. And I think there's a huge step between running a marathon and a 50K. At the same time, with the right training, with the right mindset, you can absolutely achieve that. No matter your age, no matter your body weight, no matter how out of shape you think you are, no matter that you've never run more than a 5K, this is a long-term goal that you can achieve. And today I'm going to help you reach that. That being said, reaching that goal will take a lot of time and will take a lot of effort. There are no shortcuts. There are shortcuts to injury. But if you want sustainable progress, you need to put in the work and you need to do that smartly. And I think here it's actually an interesting tangent is that why do you want to run a 50K in the first place? For a lot of people, it's about getting healthier, getting fitter. It's the challenge. And it's the training bringing you to that 50K starting line that will really change you. This is where you will gain the most benefit. It's not during the race, it's the whole training. And creating these good habits is really, at the end of the day, what truly matters. The race itself, it's nice, it's really fun, but the training before that is really what will change you as a person. If you want to make changes in your life, if you want to lose weight, if you have a sobriety story, if you want to be fitter, it takes time. And sure, you have people online, influencer that didn't train for their 50K. And really, I think this is missing the point. Why do you do that? First of all, higher risk of injury, higher risk of failure, but at the same time, you didn't change anything. My advice is take advice from normal people that have normal goals. Anyone who's built different, I wouldn't necessarily trust. You don't know the whole truth. You don't know the whole story behind that. And focus on practice and habits that will change you as a person, that will help you grow and reach that goal in a sustainable fashion. Because running a 50K could be your end goal, but for a lot of people, 50K is your entry into the ultra running world. And maybe someday you'll want to run a 50 mile, a 100K, a 100 mile. And having these good habits, setting up the right foundation for your fitness and for your ultra running journey at the 50K mark is a great way to have a long and sustainable career as an ultra runner instead of just getting injured and not being able to continue. Finding your why. Why should you find your why, and how should you find a why in a how to run a 50K ultramarathon? It's very simple. Your journey to a 50K and the 50K itself will not always be pleasant. Motivation will come and go. And if you have an end goal and a clear purpose as to why you're doing it, it will help you in your journey. It will help you get outside in the rain, in the cold, do your training. It will help you run on a treadmill even though it's really boring. You have a strong why, you will have better motivation, but also better discipline to actually achieve your goal. And another reason why it's important to have a why, the why itself might change your own approach to train to a 50K and the race you want to do. Is your goal to be fitter or maybe healthier? Maybe your goal is to eventually run 100 mile. Maybe it's to have adventure. Maybe it's to meet people. Depending on these answers, the way you will approach training and the way you will approach racing will be very different. There's a huge difference in approach between running to be healthy and maybe losing weight compared to performance, trying to win race. Winning race and pushing for performance sometimes at some point is not exactly healthy. Sometimes you need to go in excess. Sometimes you need to be on the border of overtraining. Even on race day itself, it's pretty simple. If you want to win the race, you will probably need to push the pace right out of the gate. You might blow up, you might be going too fast, but what's for sure is that going slow, you will not win the race. Now, if you just want to finish the race because you just want an adventure, well, the smart thing to do is to start slow. And that's why you see a lot of pro runner, they will blow up in races. It's not because they're not fit. It's not because they don't know what they're doing. It's because they're pushing the limit of what is physiologically possible. And sometimes that will lead to injury, and sometimes that will lead to unsustainable practice. Personally, I would advise against pushing for pure performance. Of course, ultra running is a feat in and of itself, but there's a difference between, for example, if we go to a marathon, there's a difference between running a marathon and running a 205. Huge difference. Same thing for ultra running. If you don't have to gun for time, don't gun for time. Now that you have your why, getting fitter, losing some weight, impressing your girlfriend, now you need to choose a race. And I think choosing your race is a step that is sometimes overlooked or a second thought a little bit. It's, oh, I want to run a 50K. Oh, here's a 50K. But the race you choose has a huge impact on how you train, but also how motivated you will be in your own journey. And so usually first I would say, well, choose the distance. But if you're in this video, my guess is that you want to run a 50K, right? Okay, you want to run a 50K. Then a big question you should ask yourself is when? When is a good time? And we focus a lot on, well, maybe I want to run in spring or I want to run in summer. But think also about the training. A spring race could be really interesting, but remember that your training will happen during winter. That will be on treadmill. Is that a problem for you? Why not do a race in fall and have the summer for training? Of course, if you live in Phoenix and you're thinking, wow, training in summer sounds really dumb, Simon, you adjust it to whatever your circumstances are, but think not just about race day itself and what would be most enjoyable on race day, but also the training before that. Also, I have some good news and some bad news about choosing your 50K. The good news is that there's a lot of variety. That's one of the things I love so much about trail and ultra running. Every race is different. The bad news is that what's going to be different about all of these races is that the challenge you'll be facing will be different. But a 50K will be difficult. And then I think as a first race, you need to be honest with yourself about what are your strengths and what are your weaknesses. For example, if you don't deal so well with heat, maybe avoid a race in the summer. Maybe avoid a race in Arizona. But don't be too careful about it. Look, you're running a 50K, you're challenging yourself. Sometimes a question that I hear or I'm asked is, what is the easiest 50K? What is the easiest 100 mile? What should be my first race? And I think the first race shouldn't necessarily be the easiest, but it should match your own strength. And it shouldn't just be, well, that's the simplest thing. Sometimes you need to find a right balance between something that would be convenient and something that would be epic. You know, Running around in the parking lot would be very convenient, but god dang, it would be boring. A point to point race on the other side of the world, that sounds really cool, but it is complicated. So it's a choose your own adventure, and there's advantages to both. And one of the advantage of a convenient race is that a question you will need to ask yourself is this a journey that I'm going to do by myself, both the training and also race day itself, or this is something that I'll be sharing with other people? It's very common that when you go to a race, you will have a crew or you will have a pacer. It's people that are there to support you. The crew will be at aid station, not all of them, but some of them, providing you food, providing you gear, helping you, cheering you, just being there for you. And how can you find that cool race, that race that will be so exciting for you? But first, if you think this video is helpful, please leave a thumbs up. That is helping my channel grow and I appreciate it very much. But one of the things I would ask from you is your help. If you've run a 50K before, what was your race? What did you think of it? Let us know in the comments below. Or if you're signed up for a 50K, what is the race that you're gonna do? In the US, a lot of the race will be on ultrasignup.com. That's a way to find the race. You can look for location and for time of the year. But also one of the questions for my viewer that are outside of the US is, where do you hear about the races in your country? And now let's move to one of the most important things you can do to prepare for a 50K ultramarathon, which is creating your own training plan. And there's a lot of training plan online, and what I'm going to do, of course, I'm going to share a training plan in this video, but also more importantly, I want to teach you how to create your own training plan. Instead of copy pasting it, of course you can take it directly, but I would highly suggest that you try to adapt it to yourself. And learning how to make your own training plan can be extremely valuable because your training plan is guidance to what you should aspire to do. It's kind of a generic form of what you could expect your body to go through, what is a normal progression, but we're all different. So potentially you will need to slow down sometimes, potentially you'll feel a little stronger. So this is kind of a good starting point, and when you're in the middle of it, adjust it accordingly. And you'll see in my training plan, I try to make them as smart as possible, which means that there will be buffer in this training plan so that you can adjust and you won't be behind schedule. Now that you've selected your race, you know which day is the day. You know which day is when you need to be ready for it. So start with that. We're going to construct the training plan backward and we'll use all of the time that is available for us. I think a good amount of time to prepare for a 50K would be 6 months period, but you could take a full year. You could potentially take a little bit less, and that might depend a lot on your current fitness. And one thing that you could consider is adding a marathon in your ramp up to your 50K. This is not mandatory, and the last segment of this training plan is kind of optional. You could basically swipe it out and not change anything. These 6 extra weeks are just for you to have a dress rehearsal. And although it's optional, I think if you've never run a trail race before, the trail marathon could be a good starting point. It's a good moment to really test everything out. And it doesn't necessarily need to be a race per se. It might be your longest day. Treat it as a race. Try to mimic the experience that you will have on race day so that on race day, when the shit hit the fan, you'll be prepared for it. And moving from there, the way I typically organize and suggest organizing your training calendar is with training block. I like to do 3 weeks training block where you will gradually increase your mileage, followed by a rest week where you will have reduced mileage. And the point here is that you put your body through a lot of stress, and the rest will give you good time to recover and will help you minimize the risk of injury. And a week of rest or lower mileage will absolutely not slow down your progress. Of course, if you don't have as much time to prepare for your race, potentially the rest week is something that you could try to remove. I don't recommend that because you might increase the risk of injury. It's good to have these cycles, and especially if you're pushing the limits of what your body is capable of doing, you will feel it. You will feel that this rest week is actually helpful. And what's really nice about that is that the week that I'm coming back in a new training block, my workouts are much better. And you'll see in the training plan that I propose, actually the first week of the training block, you increase a little bit more the mileage, and that will be a little bit safer because you're a little bit more rest. And the first thing that you can put in your training plan is what is the peak weekly mileage that you should aim for. For a 50K, I think a 45 mile will serve you very well. You could, of course, do more than that, especially if you're pushing for performance. You could probably get away with lower weekly mileage, but I think 45 is kind of the median where you will be very well prepared. And what we're really trying to do here is balance the two risks of injury or failure. One is the risk of injury or failure on race day, basically being undertrained. That's why we're training. But the other risk, which is probably a bigger and more likely risk, is the risk of injury or failure in your training. If you push a little bit too much, if you don't have enough rest, if you're going too fast, too many miles, there's a high risk of injury. And these injuries will set you back by several weeks, sometimes several months. That's also why I suggest that your peak mileage, you should maintain it. This shouldn't be kind of this crazy week that you will never do again. It should be something that feels decently comfortable. If you cannot maintain that weekly mileage, that means that your body is not quite ready for that kind of mileage. The other really important part of your training plan as an ultra runner will be your long run. Obviously, your long runs are important, and the longer distance race, you might want to do back-to-back long run. For the 50K, I think the most important is to have at least one long run in your training plan. Personally, I don't really see the advantage of doing run in your training that are longer than 20 miles. Of course, we're including a 26.2 miles. It's a little bit psychological here. Even myself running 100 mile, 200 mile ultra marathon, I rarely go above a 20-mile run during my training. And one of the reasons is that in terms of fitness and physical benefit to your workout, you want to have the best bang for your buck. And for example, running a one-time 40-mile in the weekend will hurt you, and you will need to have recovery, and you will need to heal from that. You will get better benefit from doing 20 mile on Saturday, 20 mile on Sunday. We're trying to not push the limit of what your body can handle, and we want to minimize as much as possible time that you need to heal and recover. Of course, you can include longer run if you want in your training plan, but I don't think this is needed, and I think at some point it gets a little bit counterproductive. And to get to that long run and final weekly mileage, what you need to do is build up gradually. You probably know what distance you can run right now, and this is kind of your starting point, and this will to some extent guide how many weeks you need to actually get to your full fitness for a 50K ultramarathon. If you cannot run a full mile right now, it will take you more time to reach that than if you can run a marathon right now. So the amount of time or weeks that you need may be compressed by that, but what you need to be careful about is not increasing that long run too quickly. In the training plan that I'm suggesting, I'm just adding 1 mile every week. So it's a slow progress. The kind of guidance that we typically say is no more than 10%. This is a rough estimate. I think increasing by 1 mile every week will be just fine. You could probably go faster than that, but keep in mind that ramping up faster, sure, it compressed the timeline to get ready for a race, but it's also increasing the risk of injury. So there's a fine balance. What I'm proposing is something that is definitely on the safer side. And now to build up your leg, we're not quite doing back-to-back long run exactly, but I typically propose a back-to-back run in the weekend for a 50K. So you have your long run, potentially Saturday, but it could also be Sunday. It's just a time thing, what is more convenient for you. And the other day, you can do basically half of that mileage. And in both cases, both your long run and kind of that half mileage run, we're talking about zone 2 run, we're talking about running, slowing, conversational pace. The goal of these runs is to actually reach that destination, and to some extent to reach that destination feeling relatively good. You're not trying to get pooped out of these runs. You're trying to build endurance, and endurance is running slowly. The next important thing that we're going to include in your training plan are rest days. For a 50K, I think having 2 rest days per week is extremely reasonable. It makes sense for you to put them Monday, Friday, especially that you have so much mileage during that weekend. Then, although we're running a 50K, and unless you're a really good runner, your 50K will be relatively slow, it's important to also include some quality mileage or some speed workout. And we typically say the rule would be an 80-20. I didn't exactly follow the 80-20, but you could adjust the number accordingly. And I included 2 sessions that would be more high intensity. So one, I say a speed workout, it could be a tempo run, for example. And then on Thursday would be a hill training. I say hill training specifically because it is very likely that your 50K will have some level of elevation gain, and if that's the case, hill training will be very important. If that's not the case, you could switch that for potentially intervals. And the importance of these sessions is not necessarily the mileage. On the long run, yeah, you're trying to reach a certain amount of miles, but On these higher intensity, it's not so much about the miles, but it's about the intensity. It's about getting that heart rate higher. It's about having high impact. It's of course the riskier workout, but it will really help you gain fitness, increase your VO2 max, increase your resistance, increase your joint resistance, increase your muscle strength. So these workouts are pretty important. Don't overdo it, but there's the clear distinction between your long run in the weekend that are pretty slow and your higher intensity. And finally, the other thing that will be pretty important to include are some strengthening session. You can have one or two, and that's where you have one or two speed session and one or two strength training session. And those strength sessions, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, it doesn't need to be so long, but it has huge benefit on injury prevention, but also on performance. So a lot of strength training for your legs, but also don't forget your core muscle. And it's good to have a warm up and a cool down. So that's why I put 3 miles on these. You run for about a mile, you do your strength training session, and then you have a cool down for about 2 miles. Same as the speed workout, the 3 miles here is kind of not exactly the point of that day. The point of the day is really the strength training session. This is what is really important on that day. And finally, let's talk about these white rows out there. So first of all, after your training marathon, I suggest that you have a week of recovery. That's also true after your 50K ultra marathon. And active recovery will just mean don't be 100% inactive, but right now we're not trying to train, we're not trying to get fitter. What we're trying to do is to recover. We're providing the nutrients, the sleep for your body for it to be able to heal properly. And active recovery will help you recover a little bit faster, especially when it comes to muscle soreness. So active recovery can be walking, can be jogging. If your joints are painful, then it could be, for example, swimming or maybe cycling. So these things will be helpful, but the goal is not to push your body or push your limit, but just to be active. Similarly, we have these white rows, these kind of rest week. These rest week is just lower mileage. What I would recommend is do kind of half of the mileage of the week that was just before that and remove any high intensity workout. I would still include the strength training session. I think that's totally fine. You had a rest for a full week of that, so still do the strength training session, but no high intensity and no long runs. And finally, the week before the race, you should taper, and tapering is kind of similar to that, but really the miles that you do in a taper, it's really just to keep loose. You're definitely not going to get fitter during that week, and the most important thing that you can do ahead of your race is to make sure that your body is well rested, because you're going to go through something very difficult, very challenging, and all of the training that you've done, if you keep training the week just before the race, you're kind of wasting a little bit of the training and the build-up that you've had before. So make sure to have a week where you have reduced mileage. Myself, before a 100-mile ultra marathon, I might include some 3 miles, 6 miles. It's not about the mileage, and it's definitely slow mile, but it's just to keep loose, and it's also a little bit psychological. We've been running so much in the past few months that it feels weird to not go for a little jog. So it's fine to have a little bit, but don't overdo it. And now comes the hard part. You have a training plan, now you need to train and prepare for your race. Sounds like it's pretty simple. You have a training plan, just do what's in the training plan. It's a little more complicated than that. First of all is that your motivation right now is super high, but your motivation will go up and down, especially when you face setback. So that's where you have to create good habits. That's where you have to be disciplined. Sometimes workouts are not great. Sometimes you don't feel like it, but you still have to do them. There are exceptions, however, and that will be very important too, is that you should not overdo it. You should not overtrain. You should not be overzealous. Sometimes you're putting a lot of stress on your body, and your body will let you know that there is potentially an injury coming up. And it's very, very, very challenging, even if you're very experienced as a runner, to make the difference between I'm sore because I had good workout or I'm sore because this is the beginning of an injury. So be careful about it. And sometimes you can err on the safer side. It said that you had a speed workout. Just don't do the speed workout. Just do it slower. Potentially take a 0 day or rest day instead of what's in your training plan. Since we have a little bit of buffer in the training plan, I made sure to include that in your training plan. You have buffer. It's okay if for 1 week you don't run as much as you were supposed to. You can go in your training plan now and adjust it accordingly, and you still have time to reach that. It doesn't mean that you just decide that you're not feeling like it and you're not doing it, but watch out for potential injuries, because that is very common, especially when you're ramping up mileage. And a good training plan that takes several months will help you reduce the risk of injury, but you still have to be careful because beyond just running, there are other things that are important that you need to practice. One is that you have to find the right gear. Finding the right shoe for you will be very important, having the right form. If it's a trail race, get used to trail, run on similar terrain that you will be facing. If it's going to be a hot race, practice in the heat. If it's going to be at altitude, can you train at altitude? These things are very important. They sound minor, it sounds like polishing, but it is important. And the closer you get to the race, the more important these specific workouts become. When you're 6 months from a race, you don't need to do heat training. That just is totally irrelevant. When you're 1 month before your race, maybe some sauna session would be helpful to be able to face that heat. And in terms of gear that you need to find and find the right one for you, of course, we talk about shoes, but beyond that, socks are really important. Having the right short and underwear to not be chafing, buy some lube, have a running vest, have a good watch. There's a lot of things that you will need for a 50K ultra marathon. And you don't want to be testing that on race day. Find the right one for you, test it in training. Your long run, one of the reasons the long run is so important is sure, it's for your body, but it's also to test your gear. And lastly, to challenge your mind. Because your mind game, the longer the race, the more important it becomes. Of course, your body needs to be physically ready for the race. But if you don't have the right mindset, the right attitude, you don't have mental toughness, you will not finish the race. And mental toughness does not only mean being a tough guy and never quitting. Mental toughness is much more complicated than that. Sometimes it's about being positive. It's having a positive outlet. It's having a positive attitude. Something that can be very powerful is expressing gratitude, for example. And sometimes it's about not being a little bitch. But practicing both avenue will be beneficial for you because sometimes you need to have some tough love and sometimes you need some compassion, and you will get the best results if you train your mind to do both. To both be your biggest critic, but also your biggest cheerleader. Another really important thing that you need to practice is fueling. One of the key difference between a marathon and ultra marathon is that fueling becomes exponentially more important the longer you race. And at the junction between a marathon and an ultra marathon is really where it's starting. Not fueling properly during your race can totally ruin all of your training. All right, race day is coming up. It's exciting. There's a lot of emotion going on. Race day is the celebration. You've been preparing so much, really soak in all of the energy because you will need it. Race day is the fun day. It won't always be fun, but it is kind of fun. And first, let's talk about some of the boring stuff. Make sure that you have all the gear that you need before the morning itself. Prepare your things in advance. Know where everything is. Go through your gear the night before. And if you're traveling for your race, of course, before leaving, don't pack last minute. Don't forget lube. Don't forget your running shoes. Don't forget anything. So having a checklist will help you with that. And it will also help you kind of focus all of that nerve through something that you can control. The second thing is that you don't want to be late for race day. And it sounds simple, but it's something that people messes up quite often. You will look on Google, how long does it take to drive somewhere? 10 minutes. Okay, 10 minutes. That's great, but remember that there might be traffic jam, especially if it's a trail race and it's a campground or something like that. It might be difficult to come in. Also, you will need to potentially walk from your car, which could be a fair distance. You might need to poop, and there will be a huge line at the poop station. You don't want to start your race shitting yourself. Take the time. And it's very stressful when you're rushed last minute for a race and you're like, you have 5 minutes to take everything and just go, go, go. Arrive in advance, have time to relax, have time to sit down. And the good thing about that is that it's usually a good idea to eat something before a run, especially a race. If you arrive early, just have your breakfast with you. Eat breakfast at the venue, and you can also meet a lot of people. These people, you will be sharing a lot of miles with them, a lot of time with them. It's a great way to start talking with people, meeting people. Then, of course, the race itself, a big no-no is that don't do anything new on race day. No new gear, no new food, nothing new. Of course, this is a general rule. We say don't do anything new, but what we really mean is don't do anything new if it can be helped. So if it's your first 50K, well, it is the first time you're running 50K, and there's not much you can do about that. However, your running shoes, don't take new shoes. Even if it's a brand and a model that you've used before, it's good that you break them in first. Don't try new socks, don't try new food. Race day, you should be well prepared. You train for several months. So why jeopardize that by introducing a new variable? Because race day, what will happen is that things will not go according to plan. You should have a plan coming in. This is really important. You should have an A goal and you should have a B goal and you should have a strategy, fueling strategy, the gear you will use. And that's really important because a lot of things that you cannot forecast will happen. A lot of problem will happen. So come in with a plan, but expect the unexpected. One of the difference between running a marathon and an ultra marathon is that typically in an ultra marathon something will go wrong. It's just a given. And then what's important is not having the perfect race. What's important is that you're able to react to it. As for the race itself, start slow. It's so easy to go too fast at the beginning. That's probably the most common mistake. That's something that you've heard before, and that's something that you will do anyway. I'm just telling you one more time, don't start too fast. There's really not many good reasons to do that, but there's plenty of reason to not do it. So try to go slower than you think. You will have more energy than you typically do on your long runs because you've been tapering and you're excited. So it's so easy to go too fast. Your goal should be to not blow up in the first half and just have a steady pace the whole race. A 50K is a distance that you can follow the same pace the whole race. We're not talking about 200 miler here where of course you'll be slower at the end. It's a 50K, you can have a steady pace. That's probably the best race strategy, is to have a steady pace. Beyond just starting slow, the other thing that is important is start eating early, start drinking a lot, use salt if needed, especially if it's a hot race. These things, you won't see the benefit right away. Eating can be challenging, but for an ultra marathon, that food that you put in your body, and as we said, potentially as breakfast before the race, but also at the beginning, is energy that you will use later in the race. And really, that's it for race day. I mean, the other part is that enjoy it. Sometimes when we're in the pain cave or when we're in the event, we can almost forget that, hey, like this is supposed to be fun. Fun doesn't mean that you won't have pain. Fun doesn't mean that you will not be challenged and you will not regret your decision at some point. But finding the little things to keep you smiling will be pretty important for you to keep going. If you're happy, you won't suffer as much. Trust me. And you will see that finish line. All right, and finally, the aftermath. Most guide videos that I've seen don't necessarily talk about that, but I think it's extremely important. So stay with me just a little bit more. So the aftermath of the race is really important. Your race may or may not have gone according to plan, but regardless of the outcome, I think you should really take time to celebrate and congratulate yourself on the progress that you've made for all of these months. Whether you finished or not, whether you met or not the goals that you had in terms of time, you did a lot of work. And celebrating that progress is important. Recognizing all the benefits that you've had is really important. Now, when it comes to the outcome, DNF is unfortunately part of ultra running. Being able to face potentially failure is something that will be important if you want to grow in ultra running, but also just in life in general. If you try something challenging, you might fail. That's this simple. If it's challenging for a reason. There's a risk of failure. And if you did succeed, remember that no race is perfect. And the reason I'm saying all of these things is that first you celebrate, but then take time to think back about the race and the training cycle that you had. Even if the outcome is negative or not what you wanted, I'm sure there is positive that you need to highlight, but also things that you can learn to improve for next time. Even if you were successful, I'm sure things were not perfect and you can learn from that. If you make sure to learn every time you race, you will always improve. Learning is important to grow. So take the time to reflect and be honest with yourself, both about the positive and the negative. The other thing that will be really important is that just like in your training cycle, rest was important. Rest is important after a race. You've put your body through something that is very challenging. If it's your first 50K, it's the first time your body is doing a 50K. You need rest. So eat well, sleep well, take some time before starting to run again. Active recovery is really important. So potentially walking, potentially jogging, but going on a full blast training the day after your race is probably not a good idea. And that's it, folks. This is my guide to running a 50K ultramarathon. I think anyone with good training can reach that point, but you need to be smart about your training. So I help you choose a race, find your why, create a training plan, apply it, race smartly, and then recover. I hope these tips were helpful. If it was helpful, please leave a thumbs up, a comment below, share with your friends. Also, I've just started a Patreon page. If you want to support the channel, please have a look. One of the important goals with my channel is to help people have their own adventure, and one of the ways that I do that is providing these videos. I want these videos to be as accessible as possible. I don't want them to be behind a paywall. I want to provide free training plan, free advice to everyone. And of course, there's costs associated to running a channel, even if it's just by myself. So if you think these videos have been helpful, please consider a contribution that will help my channel stay afloat, that will help me keep creating content to help you get out there and have your own adventure. As always, thanks for watching and see you next time.